This caused a lot of harassing of the saint and unnecessary commotion. The saint, however, knew much intuitively, but often did not speak of it, relying on God's providence. Once after service, Father Mitrophon and those who attended the services remained in the church a bit longer, and Father Mitrophon began to tell us that a whole campaign was being raised against our dear bishop, actually a veritable persecution, and that they wanted to remove him from Paris. Some people wrote to the synod, asking that Archbishop John be transferred to Brussels. We all became terribly upset and did not know what to do. Finally, we decided to sign a petition and sent it off to the synod at once, but it did not help, because after several days the synodal decree arrived, assigning him to Brussels. We were terribly saddened and, as usual, helpless and frightened. But Mother Magdalena was indignant and took it very hard. She got busy and sent me a whole suitcase full of the Archbishop's rassons and cassocks, since she was in charge of this department. She loved the Blessed One dearly, and very sternly declared to me that I should put all his clothing in proper order and into one suitcase, and to make absolutely sure that I send it with the Archbishop. She strictly instructed that under no condition was it to remain here. I did as she told me, but when I brought the suitcase before the Archbishop's departure, he took all others, but this one he would not take. I insisted that he take it, because I was afraid that Mother Magdalena would be very angry with me. The Archbishop made an attempt to protest, but encountering my firm resistance, took that suitcase unwillingly and left. Soon it turned out that the Archbishop was transferred again back to Paris and returned. He brought back all his suitcases, except the one I had handed to him. It had gotten lost, and it was never found. 9. A trip to Russia. Matushka Solodovnikova and her son Alyosha decided to go to Russia, and they came to Blessed John to get a blessing for the journey. At first he did not particularly want to bless them, but later he did. But when they left, he at once spent the whole night in prayer. I found out about it the next morning, because when I came, the neighbors downstairs complained that he had kept walking all night long, and they heard him praying. A few days later, I was in church and heard how Blessed John, doing the commemoration at the Proskomedia, loudly prayed for the severely suffering Helen and Alexis. I was surprised. On the next day, or even the same day, we received a telegram in which I read that Matushka had fallen into the metro escalator while in Moscow and was seriously wounded and in a hospital, and that Alyosha was in despair and did not know what to do. But our Blessed One knew beforehand and prayed, and of course prayed Matushka out of trouble. Glory to thee, O God. 10. Midnight meals. When Blessed John and Father Mitrophon moved to their house next to the church, I regularly began to come there to prepare food. Blessed John, as a rule, would come to the day's main meal late in the evening by midnight, and I would always try to be there to warm everything for him so that he could eat hot food. I would stay to the end of the meal. He would often come all frozen, shivering from cold. I remember as if it were now how Blessed John would come downstairs, always barefoot, when our floor had no linoleum, just simple cold cement. I would try to place a little rug for his feet, but he deliberately would always manage to stand right next to the rug, but not on it. Father Mitrophon acquired a special portable little heater and arranged that the radiator be placed right over Blessed John's armchair, so that it would blow warm air on his back. Father Mitrophon liked fish very much. Whenever it was allowed to eat fish, he either cooked it himself or asked Mother to fry it. He especially relished a fish called sungari, which was heavy and had a strong smell. While I generally never liked fish, especially that one, but since my job required me to prepare the food, I also had the privilege of sharing the meals with the Archbishop and Father Mitrophon. And so it would happen that we three would sit down at the table to a whole heap of this fish, which would ominously stare at me. I would look at it with horror and think, "Oh, good God, how will I ever eat this fish?" Meanwhile, Father Mitrophon would smile and say to the hierarch, "Your Eminence, give Zina a bigger portion." And His Eminence, with his generous hand, would carefully select the biggest fish and place it on my plate. I would be almost in tears. But what could I do? I must eat. Barely would I be able to finish it, when from the side of Father Mitrophon, a whole half of another such fish would fall into my plate. I would be at a loss, not knowing what to do, but almost in tears I would nevertheless finish that one also, thinking to myself, "Oh my goodness, not only will I not be able to get home, but I will not even be able to get up from this table. But nothing of the sort ever happened. I would get up from the table without any difficulty, be able to do whatever was needed afterwards, and would quite nicely get home and sleep like a baby without feeling any nausea. This is what it means to have a blessed man's blessing. 11. Answers to unspoken questions. Very often I had to ask Blessed John several questions, but never was able to manage to do this during the day, because after liturgy he would either be busy with something like panikidas, or he would be called by someone on the telephone, or he would simply go up to his cell, and I would not want to disturb him. Thus the whole day would be spent, and when at night he would come, and it would be the right time to ask him without disturbance, I would to my regret forget the questions. And just think, while eating hunched over the plate, enjoying his soup or something else that he liked, he would quite unnoticeably, as if addressing not me but himself, would begin to talk, and I would listen and marvel. All my questions, which I had wanted him to answer and had not said aloud, but just thought about, our dear Blessed John quietly answered. 12. Holy water. Blessed John loved our church, and together with Father Mitrophon, he put much labor and care into it. This care was, of course, mystical, unseen to the naked eye, and seemed strange and odd to the wise and prudent of this world, even Orthodox clergy, but was a revelation unto babes. Matthew 11:25. He had great faith in the power of holy water. Every night he would bless the church with holy water from top to bottom and from bottom to top. I remember how he would walk around our whole city block, around those houses which were adjacent to or touching our church. I would carry the water, Father Mitrophon and I would sing, and Blessed John would sprinkle all over, usually quite abundantly. Once we walked 3 times around all the houses which were connected to our house. Then we crossed the street, and he blessed the mailbox into which he himself, as a rule, deposited his letters, walking to the box and sealing it with the sign of the cross. He would never allow anybody else to drop his letters for him. Day or night, rain or snow, he would walk across the street, often barefoot, just to drop a letter. As we were returning from the procession, some old French woman approached us and asked Blessed John to sprinkle her head and bless her, which he did. There were cases when some people who had been met by him like that would come to us, thanking him for favors granted. He then, of course, would act as if he knew nothing. Later, when Blessed John had already gone to San Francisco, that same mailbox unfortunately was replaced by another one, and I was much grieved over this. But when he came to visit us, he at once told me, "Zina, give me holy water and the sprinkling brush and follow me." I did as he asked, and what would you think he did? He immediately went to the new mailbox and blessed it and sprinkled it with the holy water. How remarkable it is that he read all my thoughts. 13. Saint Gerasim of Jordan. I loved when Blessed John would serve, and after each liturgy would unfailingly tell the lives of the saints for the day, and how picturesque was his narrative. When he spoke, you could see everything before your eyes. He loved to tell the story of Saint Gerasim of the Jordan with the lion. It was so endearing, so childlike and guileless. Thus I learned to love that saint with all my heart. And again his talks of that saint turned out to be also providential. After Father Mitrophon left us, one of our next priests was Hieromonk Gerasim, who upon arrival said exactly the very same phrase that Blessed John had foretold about starting a youth brotherhood in our church. Young and energetic, Father Gerasim brought into reality that youth brotherhood, truly a good work and beneficial for many, both young and old. The enemy of our salvation began to persecute Father Gerasim, who was a true ascetic, and even in some ways attempted to imitate Blessed John. And through unkind people his health was destroyed, and his good work stopped. And now our church is truly small in more ways than one, just as was predicted by Blessed John. But about that I'll mention later in discussing when Blessed John was leaving us for the last time. 14. Oneness of soul. When our dear Blessed John was leaving us in order to rule the San Francisco diocese, it seemed to me that, although our beloved Father Mitrophon was to remain with us, I would nevertheless be losing everything and would remain a total orphan. Up to now I cannot recall this moment without tears. when, after the liturgy on the day of Blessed John's departure, he came out of the altar with his staff in his hands in order to tell us a few words of consolation. At that moment I thought, "O Lord, what shall I do, not being able to see my elder any longer, not being able to hear his voice, and not feel his presence? Where he is going, it is so far away." And when he began his sermon, I began to cry bitter tears. They flowed out of me like two rivers. The Blessed John turned his gaze towards my direction and said, "People who have the same goal and who strive towards the one thing needful have oneness of soul, and they never feel the distance of separation. And no matter how great that distance is, it can never be the cause of hindrance to that spiritual closeness uniting these people in oneness of soul." And after these words my tears at once dried up as if by magic, and the thought even crossed my mind, "How strange, it's as if someone has turned off the tap." At once it became so warm in my heart, so pleasant, as joyful as on Pascha, that I even forgot that our Blessed One was leaving us. And when we went to see him off at the airport, instead of sorrow I felt joy. I absolutely did not feel that he was leaving us for good. What was it that caused my sorrow to suddenly turn to joy? His prayers. Since then, and even up to now, I feel that he is near, next to me, and I talk to him and ask him whatever is necessary. The next night after Blessed John's departure, I saw a dream. Some old monk with long silvery hair down to his shoulders entered our church. He walked into it, blessed it, and left. I took a good look at him. It was clear, and I distinctly remembered his features. I felt I knew him, but I had never seen him before. Who could it have been? Only much later I saw his portrait and recognized him to be Bishop Theophan the Recluse. But before my dream I had never seen how he looked in any of his depictions. This visitation, I am sure, was some sort of opening up into the otherworldly realm of spiritual life, to which Blessed John was so close. Who knows what visitors he entertained during his long whole-night vigils and lonely prayer in our cold church. Perhaps this tardy visitor came to bid farewell, or perhaps came on time to replace him. These were the gospel crumbs from the Master's table which would accidentally fall to us below. We witnessed only a momentary shadow of what he saw clearly, as in a day. Even when he was far away, our dear Blessed John did not forget us, and would often write letters to Father Mitrophon, in which he would ask about us and send his blessing. The first Pascha without him arrived. After the Paschal midnight liturgy, when we all came down to our trapeza hall to break the fast, suddenly I heard the telephone ring. I ran to answer him. "Oh Lord, it was him, our dear Blessed John." "Christ is risen, my dear Archbishop," I cried. He was greeting us with the radiant feast of Christ's resurrection. Then Father Mitrophon came to the telephone and spoke with him for a long time. What an unusually joyous feeling, one that is impossible to forget. Surely this must be the state of being in God's grace, jubilation of spirit, which, according to patristic wisdom, is usually accompanied and threatened by sorrows out of demonic envy. They are like shadows. The more the light, the darker the shadows. That is why joys and sorrows in spiritual life are so intermixed. On his next visit to us, Blessed John showed me his pocket watch pinned to his rasa and said, "I did not change the watch and always knew the exact time when you had services here." And he smiled. What a wonderful, consoling idea. He was praying together with us even though he was so far away. Truly oneness of soul. 15. The Kazan Icon. When, after his departure to San Francisco, Blessed John came to Paris for the first time, he of course stayed in his little cell at our church. That was when Father Mitrophon was with us. In the evening, Blessed John asked me to come up to his cell and take down something for him. As I came into his cell, I saw on his table a newspaper, on which there was a photograph of the Kazan icon of the Mother of God. Some time ago, long before we had met Archbishop John, Mother and I had read in the newspapers that in England, some antiquarian had an old Russian icon, and that people thought that it was the original Kazan icon. It was in a very expensive riza, and of course would cost an incredible amount of money should someone want to buy it back for the Russian church. Then probably they would be able to return to their native land. I was intrigued by this question, and always wanted to know whether it was the original miracle-working icon or not. And now, in Blessed John's cell, I saw this newspaper article and rejoiced to think that now I would ask him about it. But when I came down, I got so busy fixing food and other such things that I forgot all about it. After the meal, Blessed John went up to his cell, and I went home. In the morning I returned to church, and after tea, Blessed John called me, asking me to iron out the veil for his klobuk. I entered his cell and saw on the table again the same newspaper, but this time it was turned over so that the article was on the bottom, and I again forgot to ask him, as I had intended to do the night before. As I was just about to leave his cell, I stopped at the threshold, thinking that I heard him say something. At that moment he turned the newspaper over and casually said, "This is a very beautifully painted icon, and is an expensive Riza, but it is not the original, because the measurements do not match the prototype." I was dumbfounded at his clairvoyance, and instead of asking for an explanation about the icon and why he was telling this to me, all I could muster myself up to say was, "What a pity." Shaken to the very essence of my existence, I went downstairs. After several days, Blessed John flew back to California, and soon afterwards our Father Mitrophon also left, and we remained all alone, like orphans, without our dear men of prayer. 16. Tears of a Saint. Now I want to tell you that we all complain about our sorrows, but Blessed John never complained, although he, the poor man, had so many troubles, and often not even his own. I myself was a witness, when once I chanced to go to the church when there were no services, and heard that someone was crying. Puzzled, I quietly went up the steps and entered the church. There I heard that the sound was coming from the altar. The side door was slightly open, and I peeked in. To my amazement, I saw the bare soles of Blessed John's feet sticking out from behind the altar table. He was kneeling with his head buried in his hands, and was weeping so bitterly. I quickly withdrew and went downstairs. It was impossible to look at. 17. Uncreated light. In the very beginning of our church in Paris, when Blessed John was still here with us, there came from Switzerland an old man by the name of Gregory. I remember neither his patronymic nor his last name. He wanted Blessed John to ordain him to the priesthood, but Blessed John did not want to, and said that he still had a lot to learn. Why he did not want to do it became apparent later. This old gentleman Gregory often used to read in the Kleros, and liked to read Akathis to the Holy Mother of God. Once he was reading the hours. Blessed John was doing the proskymedia in the altar, and the side door was open. I was not then in the church, only Gregory was. Later he told me what happened at that time. Having finished reading the hours, he wanted to ask Blessed John something, and went to the altar. When he approached the open side door, he became frozen to the spot. He saw Blessed John surrounded in uncreated radiant light, and standing not on the ground, but about a foot above it. He quickly withdrew, and could not ask him anything. Blessed John continued the service, and Gregory did not talk about the incident for a long time. When he told me, he made me take an oath before the gospel that I would not tell anyone before Blessed John's death. This kind old man never became a priest, because soon after that he died. Exactly the same type of occurrence was related to me by an old nun from Lesna. When she and the other sisters were living in Lesna, Blessed John often used to come up to one icon in the church, that of the Iveron Mother of God, which he apparently liked very much, and before which he used to pray. Once, when he was thus praying before that icon, this nun came in, and saw the same thing that Gregory had seen. Blessed John was surrounded in radiant light, and was standing not on the ground, but above it. 18. Persecution. Still later we had to endure many sorrows and difficult tribulations. Everything became sad and gray, even in the church. A new priest was in charge who was evidently instructed to be distrustful of Blessed John. Finally, one fine day, we received joyful news from Father Mitrophon. He wrote that our dear Blessed John was planning to come, and that he would like to stay in his cell, which he liked so much. I began to make preparations. Soon all preparations were ready. We were anxiously awaiting his return to us, even if for a short time. At last he arrived, and I ran to get his blessing. He proceeded into the altar, and I hastened to help bring his things into his cell upstairs. When I came down, he came out from the altar and intended to go up into his cell. I asked him, "Your Eminence, I'll make coffee at once. Should I bring it up to you?" "No, Zena, don't bother. I'll come down and have it with you all. Call me when it's ready." In 10 minutes everything was ready. I went upstairs from the kitchen by way of the narrow corridor between the staircase and the church and called the bishop. He came out and walked downstairs. At this moment the new priest in charge came out from his room upstairs and began descending the staircase, then stopped 3 steps short of the bottom. He looked at me sternly and said, "His Eminence will drink his coffee in his cell." To this I at once retorted that His Eminence had specifically expressed the desire to drink coffee downstairs, but the priest, even with greater sternness, exclaimed, "I am telling you that he will drink in his cell. I am in charge here. I give the orders." These words struck me like a knife, and I hid my face in my hands and stood there motionless, not being able to look either at Blessed John or at the priest in charge. Finally, I did not look up at my dear Blessed John. He stood with his arms and head lowered towards the ground. After several seconds, he slowly began to walk up the steps, entered his cell, and locked himself in. I went to the kitchen, prepared everything, put it all on a tray, and brought it up. Since I could not enter, I placed it on a table in an adjacent room. After that, I at once ran away home. I could not endure it any longer. In about an hour, I returned to church, opened the door, and instinctively stepped away from it. In the corridor and in the whole church it was dark and cold, as if in a grave. My heart shrunk, and at once a thought flashed in my mind: Grace has abandoned us. I rushed upstairs and without knocking opened the door to the cell. The cell was empty. In tears I fell on the floor and began to pray, begging God that Blessed John return. Then I began to sob out loud. "Oh, my dearest Bishop, why have you left me? Why have you left me? Why haven't you left me anything from you, not even the littlest suitcase?" In such a state I lay on the floor, for I don't know how long. Finally I got up. Emotionless like an automaton, I left the cell, and reaching the staircase I stopped. Suddenly I heard the door downstairs open up very slowly. In walks Blessed John, again with his head bent low as if guilty, and in his hand he holds a little suitcase. He goes up the stairs and enters his cell. I silently followed him. He places the suitcase on the floor and says, "Here, I brought the suitcase for you." And at this moment everything became bright in my soul. Everything became again as it was before he left us. "O Lord, it is my dear one. He came back, knowing in spirit how I wept, and with such a guilty look, to say that he is sorry that he hurt someone. How frightful it is to hurt a man of God. With him all grace left the church, but when he forgave everything, then the grace returned to church. But after that he never stayed with us anymore. He stayed with the French priest of the French Orthodox Church, whose wife was very seriously sick. She had a malignant tumor in her head, and Blessed John prayed her back to health. He stayed in Paris then for quite some time, for that was his last visit to us in 1965, and in 1966 he was already gone from us for good. As for the priest in charge, he later regretted and publicly repented that due to the enemy's instigation he had hated Blessed John, but it was too late. 19. My brother George. During this visit of Blessed John, the cursed icon of the Theotokos was also visiting from America with Archbishop John, and she visited all the churches in Paris. She was in Meudon in the French church, which was under Blessed John's patronage, and even in the cathedral on Rue de Rue. My brother George could not venerate the icon because he was home, sick in bed. I knew that the icon would not visit our church again because it was returning to America in a few days, and many old age homes had to be visited, as well as the homes of people who had specifically requested it in advance. I was deeply grieving that my brother George would not be able to kiss the icon. On this particular day, our priest in charge was absent. He accompanied the icon somewhere, and Blessed John served liturgy in our church. During the service, I thought of telephoning my brother and telling him to come at once to get at least Archbishop John's blessing before he left. So I did it right away. My brother agreed, but said that he could not stay long in church because at 11 o'clock a client was waiting for him and he had to see him. He came and stood in the corridor and was waiting for the hierarch to come out of the altar, but the bishop would not come out, although the liturgy was over. I was terribly upset, seeing that George also began to get nervous. The side door to the altar was open, and I saw how Blessed John was standing before the table of preparation and was consuming the divine gifts. I knelt before an icon of the Most Holy Mother of God and began mentally to pray pray to her, O most holy Queen of Heaven, help us, so that Blessed John will come out of the altar and bless George. Otherwise he might leave right away. You saw that he could not venerate the miraculous cursed icon. Help me, my dear one, that our dear Blessed One will come out quickly. And then, turning mentally directly to him, I also began to pray to him that he quickly come out, saying, You yourself know very well that George did not have the chance to get a blessing from the icon, and now even you will not bless him. Then what will happen? You know how I will suffer if he will miss your blessing too. And what do you think happened? At that moment I heard the entrance door open up and several people come in, but I still did not see them. I only saw that George moved to make way. Then I clearly saw that our priest in charge and 2 other priests also entered, and that one of them was holding the miracle-working cursed icon on his shoulders. I cried to Blessed John, The Mother of God has arrived. Blessed John quickly turned around, came out from the altar, and went straight to meet the icon. The priest opened the icon case and allowed the first person to venerate. It was George. I cannot describe to you with what gratitude I was then filled. I saw how Blessed John took the icon in his arms and brought it to our local miracle-working icon, which he touched with it. Next he placed it on the main stand in the middle of the church, so that all could venerate it. He then went to George, blessed him, and George went away, all so quickly, unexpectedly, and so perfectly timed. I am absolutely certain that Blessed John prayed for all that, and that only thanks to his holy prayers all came out so amazingly, so miraculously synchronized. Previously, Blessed John had helped George in finding a job, which had been difficult to get due to his severe sickness. He still holds that job and is happy with it. 20. My name day gift. Blessed John soon had to be leaving for America. I had to go with him somewhere. We were walking through a small alley, along which he always used to walk while living in Paris. Now I always walk along this narrow and dear street. As we were walking, he suddenly stopped and said, Zina, I want to say something to you. Actually, at that moment, I was thinking how fortunate I was to have managed to save up 100 francs and to have been able without any difficulty to buy and do all that was needed for his arrival. I always wanted to do everything myself. I know it is egotistic. And then he continued, Soon it will be your name day, and since I will not be able to greet you in person, I want to give you this now. And he handed me paper money, which turned out to be the exact sum I had spent on him, 100 francs. I immediately thought that he had probably read my mind, and thought that I regretted spending that money on him. I wanted to return this money to him, but then it seemed to me best not to do so, for otherwise I would hurt that dear man, so I accepted the money with gratitude. 21. The last farewell. On the day of his departure, Blessed John was in our church for his last farewell. There was no one there except for him and myself. We went downstairs. I made coffee. He drank some, and then, before going up, looked around all our lower quarters and said, The first thing that ought to be done is to fix this place, gather young people, and form a brotherhood, and conduct here lectures and meetings. Then we went up into the church. Blessed John entered the altar, opened the holy doors, and prayed for a long time before the altar table. Then he came out from the holy doors, directed his glance at me, and with cryptic gestures took his bishop's staff, which stood next to the icon of the Savior. With the same strange gestures, looking straight at me, he placed it at the icon of the Most Holy Mother of God at the iconostasis. Then he returned to the altar, and again prayed for a long time. What was the meaning of that? I wondered, for it was definitely symbolic. Perhaps that indicated that a woman's convent was to be here. Then he again came out from the altar, took the staff, placed it far away in the corner, and affixed it with a little piece of wire. This is where his staff has remained up to today. Then he closed the holy gates, came out from the altar, and, standing in the middle of the church, kept looking all around, saying, No, nothing should be changed in the church. Your Eminence, I then said, I love our church very much, but unfortunately it is so small. And soon even this will seem big, Blessed John answered, and in general our church soon will remain such a tiny one. and he pointed to the very tip of his middle finger, and again he looked in all directions, saying, "No, nothing should be changed in the church." Then he came to a candlestand next to the icon of the Most Holy Mother of God, and I came up also, wanting to say to him several things. "Your Eminence," I said, "because of me there are many troubles here in church, and I really do not know why. It seems to me that it would be much better if I would leave the church duties and would come only to pray peacefully. This would be better both for me and less temptation for others." Suddenly he became very grave, as I had never seen him before. He began to hit the candlestand with his fist and yelled at me, "I tell you, stay at your post." And this he repeated 3 times. I was petrified and did not know what to say, and at this our conversation ended. Soon they came for him in order to take him to the airport. I also wanted to go to see him off, as I used to do in the past. I approached him to ask a blessing for it, but instead, without answering me, he went with quick steps to the Kleros reading stand. I followed. There he found the Orologian, opened it, and pointed with his finger to the service of the 9th hour. I began to read the 9th hour and was unable to even see him off. Not only to the airport, but even to the door. I remained at my post, and that is all I saw of my dearly beloved Blessed John. One of those who went with Blessed John to the airport described the scene there. Those of us who saw him during the last year of his life could clearly observe how he was melting away before our eyes, how his strength was leaving, how all his energy was being drained by the persecution. He was in such a terrible state that it was apparent what the persecution was doing to him. For the last year before his death he was unrecognizable. He was often very serious. Being clairvoyant, he of course knew that he was leaving us forever, but we did not know this. I saw him off at the airport and was even allowed to accompany him into the plane. He was especially serious. He could not even talk. When I told him just before entering the plane, "Please look back, your flock is looking at you with love," he turned around sadly and 3 times blessed us all for the last time, and we never saw him again. Early that summer, one of his spiritual sons received a letter from him stating, "If you hear that I have died, know that I was killed." And shortly thereafter, we heard the sad news that our dear Blessed John died. As a rule, I would never go to sleep at night when I knew that Blessed John would be flying away, since I knew the exact time when his airplane would fly over our house, and he would unfailingly bless the city from above. And so this night also I waited until midnight, and saw him off after all in that way. And then went to the bed and fell asleep, and I saw a beautiful dream. I saw that Blessed John was indeed flying, not in an airplane, but just simply by himself in the air, and in the air waved his monastic mantle, with which he was covering our church by his prayerful protection. That was his last trip to us. There was a lady I knew who had very serious trouble with her legs. After services, she would always sit on the lower steps of our staircase, waiting for Blessed John to come out from church. And once she said to him, "Oh, Your Eminence, I will die soon." To this he smiled and said, "No, I will die before you." And it came about just as he said. He died on June 19th, July 2nd, 1966, and she died just a few days after. 22. My son Vladimir. Not long before his departure, Blessed John entrusted into my care his beloved orphan Vladimir, whose official guardian he was. A long time ago he once told me, little Vladimir could be saved if he had his own family. He did not say anything else then, but I at once perceived with my heart and intuition that he wanted to say by this that I should accept him as my own son. And since then it remained in my heart as my most treasured desire. And so this last time he told me that I should take the boy, and that I should write to him about all my needs and difficulties, and he would guide me with his advice. But soon after that, Blessed John reposed, and it became for me unbearably difficult, because I had no one to whom I could turn for help. Little Vladimir was accepted in my family reluctantly and with little friendliness, because my mother and my uncle were both already old, and it seemed to them that it was beyond their strength. This, of course, promised nothing good, since all kinds of difficulties arose from the very beginning. Mother thought that it was too trying for them, and that for me it was also the cause of too much stress. In general, poor Vladimir found himself in a very difficult situation, but I, unfortunately, was in no better one. I was between two fires and had to balance carefully so as to agitate neither one nor the other side. It began to make my health deteriorate. I became nervous, and it was very difficult, to say the least. I felt that I acted as my conscience and my heart dictated, my heart being prompted by Blessed John. Everyone gave me conflicting advice which I could not fulfill, and if I did not satisfy them, then new problems arose. Finally, I reached such a state that it seemed to me that if Blessed John would not help, I would not be able to continue, and so once I spent the whole night crying and praying to Blessed John. Finally I said, "Look, Blessed John, if you will not come and bless me to continue in the way I feel best in my heart, to not be confused with all these advisers, while not knowing which side to take, then I will have to abandon this godly work, and I don't know what will happen to poor Vladimir." By morning I fell asleep, and I saw a dream. The doorbell rings, and I am running to open the door, because I think that it is Blessed John. I open the door, and sure enough it is him. He comes into the hallway, the kitchen door opens, and out of there peeks Mother, Uncle, and Vladimir. But Blessed John does not pay any attention to them. He comes straight to me. I fall down to his feet, and he blesses me. Then I get up, and he goes away. I woke up from the ringing of the doorbell. I jumped out of bed and opened the door. The mailman brought me a package, which I opened and saw a magazine in English, The Orthodox Word, number 11, 1966, dedicated entirely to Archbishop John. On the cover was a picture of a snow-clad cemetery, and amidst the crosses our Blessed John was walking, exactly as I had just seen him in my dream. And on the cover of the magazine was a handwritten note, to Zina. I was so uplifted by this, and such a joyful feeling came over me in my difficult work. From that day on, I made a resolve to pay no attention to people's opinions, and only be guided by the feeling of my own heart. And God helped me through the prayers of the righteous one from the world above. To be perfectly frank, I must say that I never felt his absence. Ever since his first departure, when he told us in his short sermon delivered in our church that there is no distance between people who have only the one thing needful as their guiding principle, and so have oneness of soul. And even after his death, I appealed to Blessed John as to a living person, and he always lets me know that he is nearby, that he hears, and that he helps me. 23. Free trapeza meals. I had to endure a lot of difficulties working in church, but Blessed John always helped me. I distinctly remember one incident which occurred before his last departure. When we were walking together along a little alley, he gave me money for my name day gift to be spent on myself. At the same time he told me this: "Zina, you should continue your work with the free trapeza meals." This was in connection with our charitable work in preparing free meals in our church after services for all who served in the altar, those who would come from afar, all the old folks and communicants, and of course those who could not afford a meal. At that time he even gave me 10 francs for this purpose. I continued doing what Blessed John encouraged me to do. I tried in any case, but evidently I overdid trying, because I spent everything I had and more. I began to borrow money, which turned out to be not such a small sum as I had anticipated, $70. By that time I was regularly receiving from the Archbishop John Fund $20 every month, which I could have used for this work of philanthropy, but such a sum of money was not enough. My debt already began to make itself known, to say the least. Contemplating the burden of my debts, I was walking one night home from church past a bank where Blessed John used to go often, and I not only thought, but said to him aloud, "Blessed John, I have been doing faithfully what you told me to do for a long time now, and you see what trouble I have gotten myself into. Help me out, pull me out of this mess." So I spoke to him for a while, came home and went to bed. In the morning I woke up to the ringing of the doorbell. The mailman handed me a letter from the Archbishop John Fund. Glory to God, I thought to myself. I will get my $20 as soon as I can cash my check in that very bank, and then only $50 to go. I'll get it somehow. I'll be able to lessen my $70 debt. I opened the letter and oh, my surprise, there wasn't just $20, but a whole 70. From this surprise, I remember I even jumped from joy and immediately ran to cash the check and then quickly paid off all my debts. Then I wrote a letter to the fund in which I thanked them for such a generous gift, but I never received from them any explanation why they sent this particular sum. The next month I again received the usual $20 check. Up to today I have saved that receipt as a reminder that this money was sent to me personally from my dear Blessed John. 24. Posthumous gratitude. Blessed John would console me by even appearing in dreams to others. I used to have great difficulties in church, being forced to hear a lot of bad talk about Blessed John. Although I tried to please everyone, I could not be silent in this and tried to defend him. I suffered very much because of all this. Besides, I had a lot of problems at home and elsewhere, and I was totally exhausted. Once I came to church, and again I heard something very hurting about our saint, as well as some insults directed personally to me. Unable to endure it any longer, I burst out crying. I just stood there and wept. I felt so heavy. At this moment Alexei's brother, Seryoja, came in and saw that I was crying. Perhaps he had also heard those tales and words which referred to me. "Zina," he told me, "do not cry. All this is nonsense. Listen to what I saw in my dream today. I saw that Blessed John bowed down to your feet. I was petrified at this, because it seemed to me so incredible. Such a joy at once appeared in my heart. I forgot all my troubles, all my little turmoils, because these are all such trifles, and we only imagine them to be so immense. And Blessed John, knowing that I was in such a silly and useless state of mind, wanted to console me by having this unusual dream related to me at that moment." 25. St. Sergius of Radonezh. I often bother Blessed John with pleas for help. It used to happen that I would say, "Blessed John, help me to get somehow a little bit of money," but only that it would be for me personally to avoid unnecessary talk. And would you believe it, hardly would a day pass, and sometimes even right away, I would get a letter in which there would be a check with a note, or even right on the check there would be clearly stated, "Zina, this is for you personally." How remarkable! Blessed John would send me what I requested through people, and even give them the thought to write, "For you personally." This happened many times. His closeness was so remarkable in other ways, even after his death. There are two more incidents which occurred on the same day. 1. It was in September 1966, on the eve of the feast of St. Sergius of Radonezh. At our church there was no vigil service that day because our priest was absent. I wanted at least to light the vigil lamps for the saint, but alas, I had no oil left. By chance I looked at the table where I had Blessed John's portrait, and I glanced at him with a plea. Oh, how I would have liked to light all the lamps in church on the saint's day. That was all I said, and since I had to go out, I got dressed and went downstairs. As I came out, I almost stumbled into a lady, my dear old friend, coming to me with a package in her arms. Seeing me, she exclaimed, "My dear Zina, I'm bringing some oil for you." What happiness! I thanked her and ran to light the lamps in church. Having lit the lamps in church, I was returning with thanksgiving to God and His glorious saints in my heart. On my way, I was to pass a store where, among other old things, an icon of St. Sergius of Radonezh was for sale. During the course of 3 years, I had wanted to acquire it, but unfortunately I never could afford it. I had wanted to give it as a gift to Blessed John on his name day. I liked the icon a lot, and often stopped at the store to admire it and pray before it. And so it continued year after year. All this time I was hoping that the store owner would give me a discount on it, but he would not. And so that evening, being the eve of the feast of St. Sergius, I again stopped in front of the window of that store. The store was closed. I crossed myself and thought, what a wonderful icon. The saint looks as if he were alive, as if he were blessing me. And I instinctively bowed down as if taking his blessing in actuality. I walked away regretting that I had never been able to give it to Blessed John, and spontaneously I began to cry to him in my mind, "My dearest Blessed John, make a miracle that I obtain this icon. I'll place it in your cell." And so I went on my way. 10 minutes later I had to return by way of the same street, and I noticed that the store was open now, although it was very late. I crossed the street and entered the store, hoping to have a chance to venerate the icon, when the proprietor, greeting me with a smile, said, "Well, have you decided to acquire that icon?" "I don't think so, since I don't have the necessary sum of money." "And how much can you afford?" he asked, to which I indicated exactly half the price. He at once, to my astonishment, took the icon and gave it to me. Besides, I did not have with me at that time even that sum of money, but he trusted me nevertheless. I pressed the icon to my heart and ran away glorifying God and His saints. 26. Recording the miracles. About a year later, one late evening while in church, I looked at Blessed John's portrait and said, "I feel so guilty before you. I received so many miracles from you, and up to now I have not properly recorded even a single incident of your wondrous works, and sent them to California via Father Mitrofan to the St. Herman of Alaska Brotherhood. But that is not because I did not want to, but because I never have the opportunity. Either I am in a hurry, or when I do have a free moment, I am just incapable of doing this. You'll simply have to forgive me for that." Thus I finished lamenting over my sin before him and went home. Early in the morning I had to go to Lesna Convent. As I arrived there, and I was entering through the convent gates, I saw Abbess Theodora coming out to the porch. Seeing me, she joyfully exclaimed, "Zina, look, here is your story." She raised her hand in which she held some white paper. Having approached the dear abbess, I took her blessing, and she handed to me a Russian language magazine, well known to me, Pravoslavny Blagovestnik, Orthodox Tidings, No. 6, 1967, on the cover of which was Archbishop John's portrait, taken when he was still a young bishop in Shanghai. I wondered, what kind of story could it be? I opened it, and on page 105, I saw my story about the St. Sergius icon I just described. What a surprise! Only the day before I had asked Blessed John to forgive me for being unable to write about the miracles he performs all the time, and the following day a proof was in my hand. Not even a day passed before he revealed such a remarkable answer, and without my doing. Every time that Blessed John manifests to me his holy doings, in order to confirm that they are from him, they are always accompanied by either his photographs or something else which reminds one of him. I used to receive this magazine over the course of many years, yet this was the only time after his death that this magazine had his photograph accompanying my story. Now that I am sick in the hospital, I am free of all care and am able to record his miraculous doings. Glory be to God for everything, and for such holy men as our Blessed John. Editor's note: Father Mitrofan moved to San Francisco just prior to Blessed John's repose. The Father Herman Brotherhood, which was founded by righteous Archbishop John, kept asking Father Mitrofan for biographical information on their founder, which he kept promising to give us once he got it from Paris, but nothing came. Then once he received a private letter from Zinaida Julim, and he gave it for us to publish, which we did on the pages of our Russian language periodical Orthodox Tidings. We placed Blessed John's portrait on the cover, since the whole issue was dedicated to him. In the same issue, we published some interesting material from an Australian booklet by Archimandrite Benjamin Garshin, which gives a clearer picture concerning the persecution of Blessed John. 27. Miraculous help. Once I was in bed sick. At that time, Blessed John lived not too far from us. That particular day, I knew he would be serving in the morning, but on the morrow he would be gone to Brussels and be away for a long time. I wanted to receive Holy Communion very much, but I was so sick that I was in no condition to get out of bed. I attempted many times without success to get up, but positively was bedridden. I kept praying and hoping, when finally I gathered all my strength and with great difficulty was finally able to get up, get dressed, and come out. I was barely able to reach church, get up the steps, and enter the side room next to the church altar where Blessed John was serving. He stood with his back to the door and already had the chalice in his hands ready for communicating the believers. In despair, I thought that I was too late to receive Holy Communion and knelt behind the aneloi in the middle of the church, which hid me from the sight of the holy bishop. Blessed John did not see me, he physically could not have, and I began to cry quietly that I would be deprived of Holy Communion because it was too late. All of a sudden I heard his voice, "Zina, would you like to receive Holy Communion?" You cannot imagine what I experienced at that moment. He knew again with his spirit what gratitude I had towards God and Blessed John that he heard my soul's desire in his spirit. He confessed and communicated me, and I left the church absolutely healthy. Remarkable when just recently I was so absolutely sick. Another similar healing occurred on Great Passion Saturday, when a huge red spot and swelling of veins appeared on my leg. I could not walk and was in terrible pain. At home my mother was also sick, and in church I had a lot to do before Pascha. What was I to do? At once I turned to Blessed John. "Please help me." I barely reached home from church, went to bed and fell asleep. In the morning I woke up, and there was no trace of the red swelling. I could walk and there was no pain. Was it not a miracle? 28. Health through prayer. 1. Once, when Blessed John was still with us in France, I needed a good job, and with his help got a position at the home of one fine lady who had a huge dog. Her mother, a very old lady, came one day to visit her daughter, and the dog, out of joy, jumped at the old lady, and she fell and broke her hip. They took her to the hospital, and the doctor said that she would hardly recover because she was so weak. Then I ran to Blessed John and asked for his prayers. He promised to pray. Soon after that, the old lady began to feel much better, and gradually got absolutely well, and lived for many years. 2. Already after the repose of Blessed John, the landlady I worked for herself got sick. I ran quickly to church and had a pannikida served for our righteous one. Her illness got serious, since they found a malignant growth in the kidneys, and the doctors were very pessimistic about her condition. I had 3 pannikidas served for Blessed John. Soon after that, they made an analysis and did not find anything, and she also recovered like her mother, and is still up to today in good health, thanks be to God. 3. This same lady I worked for had a good friend who had a young sister. This girl was planning to get married, when all of a sudden her middle finger began to swell up, and then got red and pained her terribly. This, of course, interfered with her wedding plans. The finger ached terribly, and the doctors were using all kinds of treatments, but nothing helped her. A whole year passed. Finally, they examined again and discovered that it was cancer. Everybody, of course, became very alarmed and did not know what to do. I, however, ran to church, had a pannikida served for our dear Blessed John, and begged him to help this poor girl. Thus I had 3 pannikidas served. The finger of this young maiden began slowly to heal, and soon it healed completely. Now she is married and has 2 little children. 29. Removal of a wart. Here is another remarkable case. Helen Pavlova, when still a young girl, loved Blessed John very much. Once, when he was still alive, she came to me and said, "Aunt Zina, I have a wart on the sole of my foot, which I cannot get rid of except by surgery. But I am afraid of surgery. Tomorrow I must go to the hospital for this operation. Everything is arranged, but I will not go because I am so afraid. Why didn't you ask Blessed John to pray for you, and then you could have peacefully gone for the operation?" I asked her. In her childlike simplicity, she then and there prayed to him. She not only petitioned him that the operation be successful, but simply asked that she could avoid the surgery altogether. She did not even write to him, just simply mentally asked him for help, and at that very moment her wart just disappeared and never appeared again, just like that. And she never had to have any surgery. Blessed John prophesied to this same girl that she would be a priest's wife, a matushka. When he was with us the last time, she came to him just before his departure, talked for a long time, and then asked, "Can I marry a young Frenchman who is very nice and now is courting me?" Blessed John bowed his head to the side, smiled his childlike smile, and said, "You will be a matushka." Then he was silent for a while and added, "Only you are to marry a Russian." And soon she indeed became a matushka. 30. Healing from cancer. Every time that I have a pannikida served for Blessed John, I ask him that he pray to God for a specific reason, and he hears me. He hears all. I remember how, when Blessed John was leaving us, he told me, "Zina, when you or someone else gets sick, let me know at once." And when he left us for another world, I thought, what am I going to do without him and his help? But then I figured it out. Pannikidas could be served for him as petitions, and he should be asked for his holy prayers as if he were alive, and he hears and helps. Recently in our church there was such a case. One day one of our parishioners, a deeply believing man, rushed in for help. He was married to a French woman and had 3 children. The oldest, his 16-year-old daughter, recently was in our church and seemed to be such a blossoming, healthy young lady. It turned out that she hurt her side somehow, and soon after, a huge swelling the size of an apple appeared. They took her to the hospital, and the doctors found that it was cancerous and removed it. But it turned out to be not only external, but also internal, and already affected part of her lung. When the doctors discovered this, they said that it was a hopeless case, and that only a miracle could save her. That's when the father in despair rushed to church and asked our priest for prayers. When the father left, I asked the priest to serve a pannikida for Blessed John, and we prayed together. After several days, the father telephoned and asked that our priest visit his daughter in the hospital. He went, and when he returned, he told us that the doctors now said that there was hope that she would recover. How many miracles occur as the result of the prayers of our Blessed Blessed John. In truth, amongst us was a great saint, and the merciful God vouchsafed me, a great sinner, to be a witness to that. Wonders is God, the God of Israel. Zinaida v. Julim, Paris, summer 1978. Chapter 8. Blessed John in the Netherlands. His veneration by the Dutch Orthodox Church today. Unfortunately, I never met Archbishop John Maximovitch myself because I only became acquainted with the Orthodox Church in 1975. Still, I have the feeling I know him personally because our church at The Hague is filled with his blessed memory and his presence is felt in everything. The way the services go on, the sayings of our Archbishop Jacob and Archimandrite Adrian, whose spiritual father he was, his icon in our church, his vestments, beautiful silk Chinese ones, and his prayer robes still used by our Archbishop Jacob. But let me start from the beginning. Very long ago, in the beginning of the 18th century, there was a presence of the Orthodox Church in the Netherlands. Tsar Peter the Great, who stayed for a while in the Netherlands, in 1697 founded a small church in Amsterdam on behalf of Russian sailors. How the little church looked and where it stood is unknown. In 1763, the Three Falcons, a house in Amsterdam, was converted into a church, the Russian Greek Church of St. Catherine. It lasted until 1865. Permanent presence of Orthodoxy in the Netherlands started later with the marriage of King William II to the Russian Princess Anna Pavlovna, daughter of Tsar Paul I in 1816. She did not become a Protestant, as the whole Dutch royal family is, but held to her Orthodox faith. In the beginning she frequented the church at Amsterdam, but later found the parish of St. Mary Magdalene at The Hague, which still exists. It was first in the palace chapel Rustenburg Zortgeleid, and later in 1911, after Queen Anna Pavlovna died, in a house at Basel Street. After the revolution of 1917, Russian refugees joined the parish, which after Russian financial aid stopped was very poor. In 1937, with help from a special Dutch committee to aid the Russian parish, a new church was built at Obrecht Street, still dedicated to St. Mary Magdalene. At that time, the priest was Herman Dionysi Lokin, who came from Paris under the jurisdiction of Metropolitan Evlogi of Paris. In 1938, the first two converts of Dutch origin joined the Russian Orthodox Church. More followed soon as a result of the talks on Holy Orthodoxy, which Father Dionysi held in several towns. He also made a start with the translation of the Orthodox service books into the Dutch language, which was in 1944 officially recognized as a liturgical language by Metropolitan Evlogi. Parishes were founded in Amsterdam and Heerlen. In 1945, the Orthodox Church of the Netherlands also became the victim of the jurisdictional quarrels which had risen in the Orthodox diaspora. Hieromonk Dionysi followed Metropolitan Evlogi, who returned to the Moscow Patriarchate. Part of the believers could not follow this step of Father Dionysi and founded another parish at The Hague under the jurisdiction of the Synod of the Russian Church outside of Russia. The Church in Exile also founded parishes at Amsterdam and in 1955 at Arnhem. These parishes also attracted Dutch converts. A small group of Orthodox belonged to the Paris jurisdiction of the Russian Archdiocese of Western Europe under the Patriarch of Constantinople, with parishes at Maastricht, Deventer, and a small monastery at Mille Saint-Hubert. After 1945, a new stream of emigrants from Russia arrived in our country who settled mostly in and around Rotterdam. That was the reason why Hieromonk Dionysi founded a parish at Rotterdam, first on a boat, later in a house church. In 1959, this church was dedicated to the Mother of God, quick to hear, by Nikolai of Clichy, Patriarchal Exarch of the Moscow Patriarchate, with the assistance of Metropolitan Anthony Bloom of London. In 1966, Archimandrite Dionysi was ordained in Moscow as auxiliary bishop in Rotterdam to Archbishop Basil of Brussels. Bishop Dionysi died in 1976. In the meantime, however, important changes had been arranged in the Moscow jurisdiction. In 1971, Bishop Jacob of the Dutch Orthodox Church became head of the Moscow Patriarchate parishes. Bishop Jacob Akevsdijk, originally a Benedictine monk of the Roman Catholic Church, was received in 1940 into the Russian Orthodox Church, together with his friend and fellow monk, Adrian, by Archimandrite Dionysi. In 1946, they founded the first Dutch Dutch-language parish, the Orthodox Church of St. John the Baptist, followed in 1954 by the Monastery of St. John the Baptist. The chief purpose of the monastery has been the Orthodox mission to the Dutch people, translating the divine service books into Dutch, and celebrating the entire daily cycle of services in the Dutch language according to the Typicon. In 1950, Father Adrian unfortunately became ill with tuberculosis and was sent to Switzerland to convalesce until 1953. He used that time for making translations of the Orthodox services into Dutch, the Divine Liturgy and the services of Vespers and Matins, together with other rites from the Orthodox service books, translated into the Dutch language and carried out in the usual Orthodox manner, have all been found appropriate to the worshipping needs of Dutch congregations. This gigantic labor of translation ended in 1984 when the last book, the General Manaean, was translated into Dutch, so that the Dutch Orthodox Church now has a complete library of the divine service books in Dutch at her disposal. It is with this church and monastery that Vladika John Maximovitch has been involved. In 1952, being Archbishop of Brussels in Western Europe, Archbishop John unexpectedly visited the Dutch Orthodox monastery on his own initiative. He inspected the whole church, the altar, and all that was on it, the service books, the icons. He stayed for an hour or more, and seemed very pleased with the missionary labors of Fathers Jacob and Adrian. He offered to help if necessary. He had said that we could go to him if ever we were in difficulties, writes Archbishop Jacob of The Hague, and in 1953 we were. Our work was misunderstood, and I was alone, as Father Adrian was in a Swiss sanatorium. There he met Russian children on holiday with a nun from the Lesna convent in France. They also knew Archbishop John, and so we went to see him in Versailles. In December 1953, we asked to be accepted under his omophorion, as he was then Archbishop of Brussels in Western Europe. This was accepted in January 1954. We are grateful for all he did for our church. An icon of him is in our church by the table for the dead, and he is always named as founder. Archbishop John took the Dutch Orthodox Church under his omophorion, starting a long and friendly contact that has been very fruitful and a blessing for the Dutch Church. He was a wonderful spiritual father to Igumen Jacob and Father Adrian. He had much understanding for the missionary churches in general and promoted their work in every way he could. His omophorion meant a real protection to the Dutch Church. He defended the use of the Dutch language and adaptations to the Dutch situation. Everybody who has known him from that period remembers him as a saint. He was much help in times when sickness, poverty, and other troubles tempted the vulnerable monastery. When visiting the Netherlands, he always stayed in the monastery, where he felt completely at home. In 1962, he tonsured Mother Joanna, who is the eldest in the community. He also took the inhabitants of the monastery to the Lesna convent of the Mother of God in France, which became like a mother house for them. Much was learned of his prayerful and ascetic life, which left an everlasting impression on the Dutch Church. His directions and comments on the Typicon are still followed up to this day. His love for people, especially for the children, is remembered with deep emotion. We will always remain thankful to have known him and to have been loved by him, and we trust that this love will still work for us now that he is praying in intercession to our Lord and Savior, whose loyal servant he has been in his earthly life. On September 19, 1965, at the instigation of Archbishop John, Archimandrite Jacob was elected and consecrated Bishop of The Hague and the Netherlands by Metropolitan Filaret of New York, the first Dutch Orthodox bishop in the Brussels Cathedral of St. Job the Long-Suffering. After Vladika John Maximovitch died on July 2, 1966 in Seattle, understanding of the Dutch mission under the Synod of the Russian Church outside of Russia unfortunately became less and less. After a time of trouble, the Dutch Orthodox Church returned in 1971 to the Moscow Patriarchate, and Bishop Jacob, later Archbishop, became the head of the Dutch diocese, following Bishop Dionysi. At this moment, the Church has several parishes and the monastery in The Hague, and parishes in Amsterdam, Groningen, Amersfoort and Rotterdam. Here I have to finish my survey of the Orthodox Church in the Netherlands. As you can see, the Dutch Orthodox Church underwent all the troubles and the temptations of the jurisdictional quarrels which seem to be imposed on every Orthodox Church of the diaspora. As for the future, we hope to be able to develop our Church in peace and holiness, not troubled by political and jurisdictional attacks. We pray for the unity and the independence of the Orthodox Church in Europe, but I think that this will all be a long way off. The veneration and love of the Orthodox Dutch for Vladika was summed up in the foreword written by Bishop Jacob to their Life of Archbishop John, autumn 1966. This edition is dedicated in the first place to the memory of our suddenly deceased Archbishop John. We thought we could honor him best by sending you all a picture of our Vladika taken in our church during Holy Liturgy. It is very characteristic, and everyone who knew him will see right away that this is Vladika John. The picture was taken during liturgy on Holy Spirit Monday, when he consecrated me abbot. He was only 70 when he died, completely alone, as he had always been alone since he became bishop. He did things his own way, prayed all the services each day, celebrated Holy Liturgy, whether he was on a train, a ship, or in a hospital, and if he couldn't do it himself because he was ill, a priest had to come and celebrate in his room. He was known and highly honored all over the world. Even in Paris, the man who gives the signal for the train to leave the station used to wait because the Russian Archbishop was arriving. He was known in all European hospitals as the bishop who sat praying with the dying, even when it lasted all night. He was called to the bedside of the very ill to pray, whether they were Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, or anything else, because when he prayed, God was merciful. He died on July 2nd, suddenly falling asleep in his prayers. We have no father now. This cry was heard in the whole church, all over the world. The Dutch Orthodox Church is also orphaned and has no protector on earth. But he is a powerful protector of our small church by God. The last thing he did was personally send me his Easter vestments and mitre. There was no answer to my thank you letter. I no longer have a spiritual father, and I won't have another, anyway not one like him, who phoned me in the middle of the night to say, "Go to bed now. What you are praying for will be granted." Vladika, thank you for everything, and remember us, your Dutch Orthodox Church, by God's throne. Father Martin Erlings. Some personal memories by Igumen Adrian, 1966. Archbishop John is honored as the founder of the Netherlands Orthodox Church, and the first life of him to appear after his death was in the Dutch-language periodical of this church. The article that follows appeared in the same issue. Later, the major life to date of Vladika was translated in full into Dutch and printed in the same organ. Vladika John, nicknamed Shanghaiski, was a person of the type one longs to meet, even if it is only for once in a lifetime. When then such a meeting has become reality, the remembrance remains unforgettable. He was literally a unique personality, completely his own type, because many characteristics, in themselves already rare, were united in him to an exceptional degree. Still ever do I see before me how he came to look us up in our church about 15 years ago. To the eye he made no great impression, small, a dumpy figure, an irregular face, and a mess of tangled head and beard hairs. A serious speech impediment made him extremely difficult to understand, even though he spoke German, French, and English. But he did not say much, very calm, without taking any notice of the people who were waiting for him. He inspected the whole church. He went to kiss the altar and looked in detail at and into everything that was on it. After that, he studied one by one the surrounding icons and the books, the printed as well as the handwritten ones. After a full hour, he made his departure. He had wanted to make acquaintance with the Dutch priests, and when we had difficulties, we had only to make our way to him. A year later, we indeed had serious ecclesiastical difficulties. After having for a long time made fruitless attempts in various directions, we decided to hazard a chance with him also. That was the beginning of a long and friendly relationship that has been full of blessing, both for us personally and for the Netherlands Church, which he then took under his omophorion, for with him this meant that he really took us under his protection as well, and he generously defended us against all the attacks which, from lack of understanding, and sometimes even out of ill will, were leveled at the young and vulnerable community. In this way we also received the opportunity of learning to know him better, including his unbelievable way of life, for he often came visiting, and during his visitations of the Russian Church in the Netherlands, he always used to stay with us in the monastery, where he felt completely at home. Furthermore, we were repeatedly with him in France, in the monastery of Lesna, or in his room at the Russian Cadet Corps in Versailles. What struck one first of all was his unbelievably strict asceticism. It was as if a desert saint out of the first centuries had come to life again. Never did he go to bed. He even possessed no bed. On some occasions, during heavy illness, he was nursed somewhere else. He slept in short snatches, sometimes for a few minutes while standing praying, at night for a few hours sitting upright in a chair, and very disturbing for many, for a few minutes also during a conversation which did not interest him, but of which nevertheless he never lost the thread of the discussion. He used to walk barefoot, even over the sharp gravel of the park at Versailles. Later this was forbidden him by the Metropolitan, after serious blood poisoning through a piece of glass. He took only one meal a day, towards midnight, at least when that was looked after for him. Otherwise he omitted that also. But still much more impressive was the living example of his prayer. He celebrated the Divine Liturgy daily, however few people there were present. At this service he took much time over the preparation of the gifts. The discos was full to overflowing because of the many commemorations. From every pocket he pulled out pieces of paper with names, and every day new ones were added out of letters from all parts of the world, in which people asked for his prayers, especially for the sick.